Conquistadores by Michael Wood, read by John Telfer. The age will come in the ripeness of time when ocean will loosen the chain of things and bear new worlds to the storms. Then a huge country will be revealed, and Thule will no longer be the last land. Seneca's Medea, quoted by Agustin de Cerate in the History of the Discovery and Conquest of Peru, 1555. Prologue. The Lord of the Snow Star. Everything that has happened since the marvelous discovery of the Americas has been so extraordinary that the whole story remains quite incredible to anyone who has not experienced it at first hand. Indeed, it seems to overshadow all the deeds of famous people in the past, no matter how heroic, and to silence all talk of other wonders of the world. Bartolomé de las Casas, A Short Account of the Destruction of the Indies, 1542. Up just before 3 a.m., we gulp down several cups of hot coca tea, and then each of us carefully packs a ball of coca leaves in the cheek. Outside, the ground is white with frost. It is bitterly cold, and we cram on every available layer of clothing. A deep breath, then on with the rucksack. Geronimo, the jolly horse-handler, has 4 helpers to carry the heavy gear, the tripod and boxes, though we have cut the shooting kit down to the minimum. I take the rucksack for my cameras, and soon regret it. Any extra weight becomes a struggle. We start off at 15,000 feet, going up to nearly 17,000 on a steep rocky climb over a treacherous scree of boulders intersected by streams. The first few hundred yards from the camp are lung-bursting. You gasp in the freezing night air every few seconds and never seem to get enough, almost drowning in air. The night is cloudy, but a full moon, just on the wane, watery behind a thin curtain of cloud, helps to light our way. We stop every 10 minutes for a rest, and in about an hour reach the foot of the glacier, the sacred ice that the pilgrims call in Quechua, the Inca language, Coloriti, the Lord of the Snow Star. Coming up from below the glacier, the huge white mass of ice suddenly looms up under the deep blue night, framed between black crags like a still, pale monster. We stumble the last few yards down a rocky step to the very edge of the ice. Glistening, gently dripping, it almost feels alive. Rows of wax candles have been left under its lip, and little knots of people sit in silence, some praying, some just holding hands. 2 women in traditional country dress with round fringed hats and huipils, tunics, sit by their candles, murmuring quietly. Our guide immediately goes down into the trough by the ice edge, touches the ice with his forehead, salutes and embraces it, scattering coca leaves across its surface. Then he gestures with his feathered walking stick and strokes the ice once more, mouthing a little prayer in Quechua to the Apu, the spirit of the mountain. It is a magical moment, made all the more poignant by the plaintive sound of pipe, accordion and drum somewhere out in the darkness. Higher up on the glacier, there is a magnificent view in the pre-dawn light. Black, jagged peaks, streamers of snow lifting off their tops, while the first hints of dawn soften the deep blue of the night sky. Up the snow slopes, groups of dancers perform their rituals with the bear men in their animal skins and whips. This is the most ancient kind of worship here, pre-Spanish, pre-Inca even. The light grows, the peaks are touched golden, shining streaks of light spread across the snow in the high ravines. There are scenes of great jollity, brass bands and lilting songs. There is a snow slide on a steep part of the glacier, and crowds have gathered, taking turns to whoosh down accompanied by loud whoops and cheers, one man cradling his euphonium. The sky is now an intense, dazzling blue, and around 8 o'clock, the sun flashes over the top to roars from the crowd. Up the glacier, hundreds of tiny dots are visible, people bringing back the most important souvenir, ice hacked out of the ice floe. To one side, lone pilgrims are loading blocks of ice on their backs, just as they are depicted on the old Andean drinking cups, and in the pages of the 16th century Andean chronicler Huaman Poma. One of them stops, and with a gesture to the surrounding peaks, speaks to us. These mountains are our apus, our spirits. We are a community from Paucatambo in the Sacred Valley. We come here every year. After we have been up on the ice, we head off on foot to Tayancani, along that path up there, to our Huaca, a holy rock, up to the west of the valley. We walk till midday tomorrow. This is what our ancestors have always done. These ceremonies are not to do with the church. More people had joined us now, and an old man butted in, speaking in Spanish. Ours is a true worship, though it is not to do with the church. A third man, more educated, spoke. We are told that when Inca Manco fought the Spanish at the time of the coming of the whites, he said this to the indigenous people. Don't forget the rituals of your ancestors. Do what you have to in public, but in private keep our old customs and ceremonies close to your hearts. And this we still do. It was a theme we would encounter again and again in our journeys through the Americas in the footsteps of the Conquistadores. This book is about events which took place nearly 500 years ago. The Spanish conquest was one of the most cataclysmic events in history. Events which, in a couple of generations, overthrew the last high civilizations which had arisen independently on Earth, which saw Spanish expeditions endure the most unbelievable hardships to open up lands from Tierra del Fuego to the Carolinas. Few events, if any, in history match these for sheer drama, endurance, and the incredible distances covered. And the conquest is still within living history. Its effects are still with us, working themselves out now across the globe. Here in Peru, as they had done in Mexico, the Spanish conquistadors swept away the indigenous state, the Inca Empire, and its state religion. But below the level of the rulers, as we were to discover, history works in mysterious ways, and many beliefs and customs were maintained tenaciously by the ordinary Andean people. And this ceremony on the wild and forbidding slopes of the sacred mountain was one of them. After the pilgrims had begun their descent, I lingered on the ice, unwilling to let go of such a haunting, splendid scene. History leaves many wounds, some never heal. In time, some do. The Conquista was at once one of the most significant events in history, and one of the most cruel and devastating. But in history, there is no going back, and blame or regret are pointless. All we can do is try to understand. The Inca past was already being idealized in the immediate post-conquest generation by Peruvian historians such as Huaman Poma and Garcilaso Inca, and it still is today. But that past is irrecoverable now. What we see is as much the product of the conquest and of what has happened in the nearly 500 years since, as it is of that deeper past. Many times on these journeys I found myself feeling pessimistic about the fate of all these traditional cultures, fighting against the onset of global culture, their encoded identities built up over millennia being scrubbed away so rapidly in a generation or two. But events such as the Collariti pilgrimage are galvanizing mixes of past and present, Inca and Spanish, and they show that out of the debris of history, new identities are shaped from what is at hand, and in some magical way, these carry on the encoded memories in societies and civilizations, just as in people. Something gets handed down, almost in the manner of genetics. At the start of the third millennium, the past still lives on in us, forming new worlds out of the debris of the old and the remorseless and destructive march of history. As we prepared to go, sunlight flooded the valley. The sound of brass bands echoed around the peaks, and a spindrift of snow floated along the glacier above our heads, swirling coca leaves in the wind, and what looked like the finest sparkling shards of gold. Looking back now, it was a fitting beginning to a series of journeys which would lead us in the footsteps of the Conquistadores from Miami Beach to Lake Titicaca, from the deserts of northern Mexico to the snow peaks of the Andes, and from the forests of the Amazon to the heights of Machu Picchu. Michael Wood, July 2000. Chapter 1. Cortés and Montezuma. When we saw all those cities and villages built on water, and the other great towns on dry land, and that straight and level causeway leading to Mexico, we were astounded. These great towns and shrines and buildings rising from the water, all made of stone, seemed like an enchanted vision from the tale of Amadis. Indeed, some of our soldiers asked whether it was not all a dream. It is not surprising, therefore, that I should write in this vein. It was all so wonderful that I do not know how to describe this first glimpse of things never heard of, never seen, and never dreamed of before. Bernal Díaz del Castillo, The Conquest of New Spain, circa 1565. At the end of the hot August of 1520, Monday the 27th to be precise, the German artist Albrecht Dürer paid a visit to the royal residence of the Spanish King and Holy Roman Emperor Charles V in Brussels. Dürer, now aged 50 and a famous painter, wandered in the delightful garden behind the house, admiring the fountains, the labyrinth, and the beast garden, taking pleasure in the creations of the humanistic civilization of Europe. As it happened, that very day, indeed that very hour, far away in Mexico, Hernán Cortés, in the name of King Charles, was preparing to attack the Mexican town of Tepeaca, to massacre its warriors, to brand and enslave its women, to lance, burn, and even feed human beings alive to dogs. By now, Cortés had been campaigning in Mexico for 18 months. He had already sent the first news of Aztec wonders back to Europe, an account which included a map of the great capital city of Tenochtitlan, its myriad waterways and canals like a grander and more spectacular Venice, as Cortés said, the most beautiful thing in the world. Cortés had also sent treasures and works of art back to Europe from this hitherto unknown civilization. These had now arrived in Brussels and come to the king's house. Dürer was taken inside to see the pieces laid out in several chambers. He recorded his reaction in his diary. I saw the things which have been brought to the king from the new land of gold. A sun all of gold, a whole fathom broad, and a moon all of silver of the same size. Also 2 rooms of the armour of the people there, with all manner of wondrous weapons, harness, spears, wonderful shields, extraordinary clothing, beds, and all manner of wonderful objects of human use, much better worth seeing than prodigies. These things are all so precious, they are valued at 100,000 florins. All the days of my life I have seen nothing that touches my heart so much as these things, for I saw amongst them wonderful works of art, and I marvelled at the subtle ingenia of men in foreign lands. Indeed, I cannot express my feelings about what I saw there. The gold disc, an Aztec calendar, and the other precious metals have long since been melted down, but a few pieces have survived from what Dürer saw that day. Ornate ceremonial spear-throwers crusted with gold, a tiny jade frog, an obsidian blade. Most remarkable of all, the featherwork sent to King Charles can still be seen. Shields, fans, standards, and cloaks, a mosaic depicting the demon Ahuitzotl, and even now, nearly 500 years after they were made, although their